on that are a matter of force. So we believe in a voluntary society, and we're being ripped off by the government and by these institutions in league with the governments and by the power elite in league with the government. So
okay, so this is a very helpful primer for me, but I have the same question to you that it's funny how left and right kind of come together in, at certain points on the spectrum where people are set up, because this analysis of society I also hear from the anarchist left. And my question to them, or the kind of the post-capitalist left, and my question to them is, well, how do you organize a complex modern state under such idealistic circumstances? And I guess I would put the same question to you.
Well, you wouldn't have a state. I mean, that's, of course, first of all. But how would you organize, say, a complex modern society? I think.
How would you organize America?
Well, first of all, America would be this geographical location. There wouldn't be that horrible business in Washington, D.C. And I think that people do indeed organize themselves. There are many complex institutions of nonprofit sort, of for-profit sort, of in all areas of society that are organized without the state. And in fact, the state is a parasitical institution that wrecks society, and that really human society is self-organizing. That in terms of the market, in terms of our social relations, that you actually don't have to have a state, and that indeed the state is a problem.
It's so interesting, because this sounds very 18th century. I mean that as a compliment. I mean, it's like the most idealistic writers, as they were kind of teasing out the implications of human freedom and why is it ideal for human beings to have freedom, and why can we trust that? They also believed that if human beings were given freedom, the human inclination is to organize, for the greatest good, voluntarily, and that force is always wrong.
Yes, in fact, there's an interesting passage in Jefferson where he says that he's always been interested in the Indians because they don't have government. And he unfortunately didn't study that, maybe a little, although he was one of the more libertarian, of course, of the framers.
So interesting. Well, then what would you do? I mean, I think one reason the left doesn't take on the Federal Reserve, I was kind of joking when I said we don't get it, but I'm not really joking. We're very unsophisticated about financial matters and economic issues for a lot of ideological reasons. But that said, what would you replace it with?
I think the market would replace it with gold, is my guess. I mean, money came into existence as a market institution. It wasn't an invention of government. Really, there's been nothing any good that was invented by government. Mass war, genocide, this sort of thing is, of course, invented by government. But that in the market, money developed as the most liquid commodity, so that people chose gold and silver freely. Then government, in effect, nationalized it. King stamped his face on it and started to fool with it and to inflate it. This has been true. All governments all throughout history. And you mentioned before, why would the power elite, the Fed, have caused this crisis deliberately? And I don't think they did, but it's a little bit like if you had a counterfeiting press in your basement. If I had a counterfeiting press in my basement, you would know it's immoral to use it, but there would certainly be a big temptation. Well, the federal government has got a gigantic counterfeiting press called the Federal Reserve, and they used it more than they, even by their own standards, they ought to have. They've brought about probably a worldwide depression. So it's, a time for us to talk about why these institutions are evil, moral evil, economically evil, politically evil, and right. Talk against fascism and do the kind of work that you've been doing so extraordinarily.
Thank you. Well, so again, not to keep peppering you with questions, but if the Federal Reserve is a private entity, and it's not it's not, how can I put this? What recourse do citizens have in challenging the Federal Reserve?
Well, it's an illegitimate institution. I mean, it's like it's like saying, if we didn't have a government CIA, would we have a private CIA? No, we wouldn't. I mean, it's entirely illegitimate. Nobody but a government would engage in what the CIA does. And the Federal Reserve it's entirely an illegitimate organization, so there would be no private Federal Reserve. Such a thing can only exist at the behest of and in cooperation with the state.
I do understand that. I guess I'm asking a different question. Let me try it again. I'm very focused these days on practical steps that citizens can take, and what I'm hoping will create is a transpartisan army. Like, clearly the battle lines have to be redrawn. I mean, clearly, I learn more about this every day. It's the people across party lines, the people who've kind of woken up to the subversion of their liberties and this kind of evil structure that is, this vile marriage of corporate interests and state interests and military industrial interests and so on. So in building that army, I keep looking at, well, what can we do? What are our action steps? What are our pressure points? And the Federal Reserve is so powerful and so kind of beyond kind of recourse by ordinary citizens. I'm wondering, is there any action step that we can take to challenge this kind of hegemony, or even get people practically to think critically about how it's doing its business?
Well, I think
what recourse do we have as citizens is sort of what I'm asking.
Well, I think the first step is to educate yourself. So I would think, little books, very easy to read books like The Case Against the Fed by Murray Rothbard is one good way. But first you have to sort of withdraw your intellectual consent. You have to learn about the fact that you're being ripped off. There's a reason that the Fed is never mentioned in any of the discussions these days about the economic crisis, that maybe it's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, maybe it's people lending too much, or poor people got mortgages they should have gotten, whatever the reasons that are
mad when I hear that.
The reasons that are being held out. But none of this could have taken place without the agency of the Federal Reserve. But it's true, you're not supposed to be actually interested in this organization. You're supposed to be bored by it. Maybe it's the name on the bills in your pocket. You're not supposed to know. But the reason you're not supposed to know is because you are being ripped off to an unbelievable extent. And the trillions and trillions of dollars of new credit they're creating right now for the benefit of the banksters is going to cause just tremendous depredations on the American people and people all over the world, and you're not supposed to know about it. So the first thing is know about it, read about it. Right. It's a fascinating story of special interest and special interest ripoff. And I've argued, in fact, that the government could have never fought the wars it's fought without the Federal Reserve. There's a reason that debates over the budget were never a question when Bush wanted another $100 billion, another $150 billion to murder people in Iraq or Afghanistan. It's never debated because they don't have to tax anybody for this. They just print it. But this has certain things follow from this. Right. And we're seeing right now this depression is one of the things that follow. And I also want to credit you on what you said about this sort of crazy partisanship. Really, the two parties are just wings of the same bird of prey, as Butler Schaefer says. And we're supposed to fight them. The Republicans fight the Democrats fight the Republicans. But we're supposed to ignore the guy behind the curtain who's actually doing so much damage to all of us.
Exactly. You're completely right. I mean, I often tell audiences that when I'm invited on these kind of national debate shows, they, as you well know, the producer will, do a pre-interview and basically say, don't agree with the other side, And if they present the other side's position, I say something like, well, that sounds reasonable, or there's certainly a nugget of truth in that observation. I'll be given in no uncertain terms the instruction that, that's not good television. In fact, I just was on Fox News this morning, and Fox and Friends, and the producer said before cameras were rolling, remember, you don't have to like each other. So there's this kind of machine set up really on both sides to generate people screaming at each other and caricaturing each other's positions. And I've got a whole chapter on deliberation in Give Me Liberty, because the founders really wanted citizens to be the ones leading the debates, and especially citizens who disagreed with one another, to know how to sit down together respectfully and, educate each other and challenge each other, because you get better policy outcomes that way. They didn't intend for pundits and a whole kind of corporate punditocracy to hijack the debate process. And, one of these core values that makes America so precious when it's working as it should is that, unlike citizens in the rest of the world, we're supposed to be able to disagree without violence. But I'm very concerned that these kind of two mountains of embedded partisanship with the, institutes and the think tanks and the media outlets that all thrive on us hating and caricaturing each other, are really just going to escalate, the partisanship into worse. This campaign is like a new low. And certainly I'm now convinced that this partisanship and this name-calling keeps us from organizing in our numbers, because one thing we have going for us, of course, is our numbers, to direct our attention at the people who are our common enemy, our common antagonists. I believe that more than ever now.
And the role of the corporate punditocracy is to make sure that the